The bright lights of wrestling arenas have often masked chilling stories of fatal consequences. In this video, we'll talk about 15 wrestlers who were involved in fatalities. Let's begin. Number 15. The Great Khali. The sound of Brian Ong's skull hitting the mat was sickening. Before, his lifeless body stood a giant. The 7-foot man from a poor Indian village who was in that moment felt his dreams of wrestling greatness were over before they had truly begun. In May of 2001, during a routine training session at All Pro Wrestling in Hayward, California, Ong was practicing the Spine Buster, a move that required precision and strength. He was paired with the Great Khali, who had already completed the move flawlessly earlier that day. But this time, Ong grabbed Khali's shirt mid-move. This mistake caused him to land badly. Ong collapsed, vomited, and was rushed to the hospital. He was pronounced dead upon arrival. Number 14. Ox Baker. Ray Gunkel collapsed in the locker room, struggling for breath after a victorious match against Ox Baker. By night's end, he was dead. A year earlier, Alberto Torres faced Baker and met a similar fate days later. 2 deaths, 2 matches, 1 name at the center, Ox Baker. Promoters capitalized, linking the deaths to Baker's signature heart punch. Though innocent, Baker became an infamous villain, his legend born of tragedy. But who else turned tragedy into legend? Stay tuned to uncover more about this notorious figure later in the video. Number 13. Frank Goodish. Screams filled the Bayamon locker room as wrestlers found Frank Goodish, better known as Bruiser Brody, clutching his stomach, blood pooling beneath him. On July 16, 1988, during a Puerto Rican wrestling event, Brody was fatally stabbed by Jose Gonzalez, known as Invader 1. After a private confrontation, Brody, a legendary figure known for his wild persona and fearless style, left behind a legacy that will never fully be fulfilled. Rest in peace. Number 12. Billy Jack Hayes. The sound of gunfire echoed through the quiet Portland night. Police rushed to the home of a former wrestler, Billy Jack Hayes. Inside, they found a tragedy. Jeanette Becraft, 85, was dead. A gunshot wound had ended her life. Hayes, 70, was standing nearby. Silent, uncooperative, a standoff ensued. Then his arrest. Hayes, awaiting trial, sat behind bars, his legacy tarnished by a single violent night. Number 11. Ion Johnny K9 Kritoru. The screams were silent, the blood chilling. Lynn and Fred Gilbank were found brutally shot in their own home in 1998, their deaths linked to a sinister underworld. Years later, another man, Jonathan Barber, became collateral damage in a gangland plot gone wrong. At the center of these shadows, Ion Johnny K9 Kritoru. Once a WWF wrestler in the late 1980s, Kritoru's real notoriety came from his ties to organized crime. A member of Satan's Choice Motorcycle Club, he was accused of murder and conspiracy, his wrestling legacy buried beneath the weight of blood-soaked allegations and crime. Number 10. Vern Gagne. The nursing home was silent, but chaos erupted in an instant. Vern Gagne, an 82-year-old wrestling legend battling Alzheimer's, lifted 97-year-old Helmut Gutman and threw him to the ground. Gutman, a frail former cancer researcher, suffered a broken hip. Days later, he was dead, his body unable to recover from the trauma. A WWE Hall of Famer and then 10-time AWA champion, Gagne's legacy remains forever shadowed. Number 9. Chris Adams. The gunshot shattered in the night in Waxahachie, Texas. Chris Adams, once known as Gentleman Chris Adams, lay lifeless in a pool of blood. His former roommate pulled the trigger during a drunken brawl, ending Adams' tumultuous life on October 7, 2001. This tragedy followed Adams' indictment on manslaughter charges related to his girlfriend's drug overdose just 3 months prior. Despite his troubled past and substance abuse, Adams had plans for redemption, but his legacy remains overshadowed by tragedy. Remembered for his time in WCCW and brief appearances in WWF, Adams also trained Stone Cold Steve Austin. But Adams isn't alone in his tragic fate. Stay tuned as the wrestling world holds even darker secrets that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Number 8. Marty Jannetty. The Chattahoochee River, dark and silent, held a chilling secret, or so Marty Jannetty claimed. In August of 2020, the former WWE star stunned the world with a Facebook confession. At age 13, he had killed a man. Police in Columbus, Georgia launched an investigation, scouring records for any signs of the alleged murder. But the truth unraveled. Jannetty later recanted, admitting that he fabricated parts of the story. While he confirmed the altercation and striking the man with a brick, he insisted no murder occurred. Once a charismatic WWE performer, Jannetty's dark tale blurred the lines between truth and fiction, leaving his legacy steeped in infamy. Number 7. Lex Luger. The lifeless body of Miss Elizabeth, the First Lady of Wrestling, was discovered on May 1, 2003, in the Marietta, Georgia home she shared with former wrestler Lex Luger. Her death, ruled accidental, was caused by acute toxicity from a deadly mix of alcohol, hydrocodone, and alprazolam, or Xanax. The wrestling world was shaken, its golden era marred by a tragedy. Authorities searched Luger's residence and uncovered a trove of controlled substances, leading to 13 felony drug charges. Though Luger avoided direct charges for her death, the event cast a dark shadow over his legacy. Number 6. Brian McGee. The screams echoed through the night, leaving blood-stained sidewalks in their wake. On July 24, 2013, Bianca McGoy, just 25 years old, was brutally stabbed to death outside her Tampa, Florida apartment. Her ex-boyfriend, Brian McGee, a former WWE developmental talent known as The Future Donovan Ruddock, delivered the fatal blows. Multiple stab wounds to her neck and torso left her lifeless. McGee fled the scene but was apprehended. A wrestler once signed to a WWE developmental contract from 2010 to 2012, McGee's bright future had devolved into a nightmare of violence. In 2016, McGee pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to life without parole. Number 5. Tammy Sonny Stitch. The screech of tires and the deafening crash shattered the night on Ormond Beach, Florida. On March 25, 2022, 75-year-old Julian Lasseter's life was tragically cut short when Tammy Sonny Stitch, a WWE Hall of Famer, slammed her Mercedes-Benz into a stopped car at high speed. Stitch, once celebrated as the First Lady of Wrestling, had spiraled into a life riddled with legal issues and personal struggles. Charged with DUI manslaughter and other related offenses, she pleaded no contest in 2023. In November, she was sentenced to 17.5 years in prison, followed by 8 years of probation. Number 4. Scott Hall. The crack of a gunshot shattered the Orlando night in January of 1983. Outside a strip club, 24-year-old Scott Hall stood over the lifeless body of Rodney Perry Turner, the weight of a fatal decision etched on his face. The two had clashed violently after Turner, suspecting Hall of involvement with his wife, shattered his car windows. The altercation escalated, and in a desperate struggle over Turner's .45 caliber handgun, Hall gained control and fired, ending Turner's life with a single shot to the head. Hall claimed self-defense, and prosecutors eventually dropped second-degree murder charges due to insufficient evidence. But the incident haunted him for decades, fueling substance abuse and post-traumatic stress disorder. Despite his dark past, Hall rose to wrestling stardom as Razor Raymond in WWE and later as a founding member of WCW's New World Order. The 1983 shooting, however, remained a ghost that followed him throughout his life. Number 3. Rey Mysterio. On March 20th of 2015, during a tag team match in Tijuana, Mexico, professional wrestler Perro Aguayo Jr. suffered fatal injuries following a maneuver by Rey Mysterio Jr. Rey hit him with a dropkick to the back, sending him to the ropes to set up his move, the 619. Aguayo landed awkward and went limp on the ropes. At first, nobody noticed how bad he was, and the match continued for a few minutes. Once they realized he was unresponsive, they stopped the match and he was taken to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. The autopsy showed that he died from cervical spine trauma that caused cardiac arrest. The death was ruled accidental and no charges were filed against Mysterio. Number 2. Jimmy Superfly Snuka. Nancy Argentino's lifeless body was discovered on May 10, 1983, in a motel room shared with her boyfriend, WWE legend Jimmy Superfly Snuka. Her skull was cracked and her body was bruised. The autopsy shows she died from a traumatic brain injury consistent with repeated blows. Snuka's stories were inconsistent. First, he said that he pushed her, then he said that she slipped on the road. For decades, no charges were filed. In 2015, amid renewed scrutiny, Snuka was indicted for third-degree murder, but was later deemed mentally unfit to stand trial due to dementia. He died in 2017, leaving unanswered questions to a tarnished legacy. And number 1. Chris Benoit, double murder-suicide. The Benoit home became a scene of unspeakable horror between June 22nd through 24th, 2007. Chris Benoit, a revered wrestling technician, strangled his wife, Nancy, binding her wrists and ankles before placing a Bible by her body. The next day, he killed his 7-year-old son, Daniel, using a chokehold, sedating him beforehand. On the third day, Benoit hanged himself in his home gym. Authorities found the body after WWE called him out for not showing up to work. Investigation showed that he was using steroids and had advanced chronic traumatic encephalopathy for years of head trauma, and changed the conversation about wrestler health and tarnish Benoit's once golden legacy. Each name reminds us of the cost of fame and the weight of its choices. If you found this video compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories from the world of wrestling. But before you go, have you ever wondered about the famous figures who left us in September of 2024? Dive into our captivating video and discover the legacies of iconic actors, athletes, and artists who shaped our world.